Hi guys, Happy New Year! This is actually my first video since Jurassic World Evolution 3 came out in October, so sorry I haven't been around. I've been busy playing Evolution 3. I love this game, and I feel like I'm still exploring and finding my bearings. More content to come in the near future, but to kick off 2026, I wanted to talk about DLCs for Evolution 3 because the Wetlands Pack came out about a month ago and thoughts have been percolating ever since. What was fun is that unlike previous DLCs, Frontier did not tell us everything up front this time around. Instead, they gave us a trickle of information leading up to the release of the pack, which I don't like because I very selfishly need to know everything as soon as possible, and that's what I'm used to. But I also like it because it builds hype and theoretically gives us some extra time to speculate about what's in a pack. I say theoretically because I started writing a version of this video right after the Irritator reveal, but figured there was no point rushing it out since the second species was probably going to be revealed the next day, which is exactly what happened. But with the release of the pack having come and gone, I still wanted to do a more general video about my thoughts on the Wetlands roster, what the structure could mean for future DLCs, and when we can expect a Rebirth expansion. Let's start off with my thoughts on the Wetlands Pack and Frontier's choices. As always, there are timestamps in the description if you want to skip ahead. This pack is unique compared to all previous Evolution DLCs because it includes 3 new species and a few hundred new scenery pieces with a swampy bayou aesthetic. The first species revealed was Irritator, which leaked a day early, but let's ignore that. If you'll recall, I had predicted Irritator as the 4th new dinosaur for the base game, which ended up being Ornithomimus. I've been a huge champion for Irritator. It was number 11 on my wish list and honestly should have been higher. I've really wanted it so that we have a more paleo-accurate Spinosaurid, and even though it didn't come in the base game, it did serve as the flagship for the first DLC, so I still count that as a win. As expected, Irritator looks fantastic. All of the new additions to Evolution 3 have been stunning and so well designed, and Irritator follows this modern design trend. I love the big paddle tail and the patterning. Baryonyx found dead in a ditch. For the record, since speculation is what I do, my predictions for the 2 other species were Ostroraptor and Deinosuchus, 2 very highly requested animals that made sense with this theme. Also, there were no new carnivores in the base game, which surprised me since I figured a new cool carnivore might have helped with the game's sales. That's why I expected Irritator or something extra marketable like Megaraptor, but that didn't happen, and that's fine. We got Guanlong in the deluxe, but otherwise all the new species at launch were herbivores, plus Cayuajara. Gorgeous herbivores, by the way. I'm bringing this up because I thought it wouldn't have been unrealistic for the first DLC to be all carnivores to sort of make up for just how herbivore heavy the new species were at launch. The second reveal was Ostroraptor. I really like this design, but when it comes to feathered dromaeosaurs, I'm easy to please. Ironically though, there's contention if Ostroraptor is actually a dromaeosaurid. It might be a bird, it's complicated, but it doesn't matter because we got it. Ostroraptor was number 9 on my wish list. I actually had it above Irritator. And it's a piscivore, which adds some great variety to the behavior of our raptors and the environments we build for them. My only note for Frontier is that it doesn't swim. In my opinion, if Pyroraptor can swim, Ostroraptor should be able to swim. Hopefully that's something that can be updated down the line. So 2 great picks that were highly requested. This pack was shaping up to be fantastic, but at this point was when the YouTubers with inside knowledge started warning us to temper our expectations. Evo Square said that Irritator and Ostroraptor were the 2 species in this pack that she had on her personal wish list. So if you know anything about Evo, you would have realized that immediately ruled out Deinosuchus or any big croc. We will circle back to this DLC's lack of big croc, but with that ruled out, I was thinking a herbivore was likely, maybe Lurdusaurus, which was being thrown around a lot. Pterodostro was coming to mind for a new pterosaur, but then it was Hypsilophodon, and I don't hate Hypsilophodon. I think it's cute. I had Zalmoxes on my wish list, which I literally described as a smaller Dryosaurus to help fill out mixed herbivore enclosures, and that's exactly what we got. I am a bit disappointed they didn't use their paleo-accurate style for Hypsi. I personally would have preferred something slightly feathered, but I definitely understand their thought process here. Hypsilophodon is referenced in the novels, and so they've given it a slightly more retro design so that it fits in aesthetically with the other Jurassic Park designs from the 90s. We can make novel-accurate builds, and Hypsilophodon will visually fit in with the other animals. I feel like the same approach was used for Segisaurus. They even both have the same splotchy patterning. I know a lot of people hate the Frontier splotches, but I am actually a splotches defender. I think it can look interesting, and I don't dislike it. What's most aggravating about Hypsilophodon is that it's not a good pick for a Wetlands pack. Why is it in this pack? To my knowledge, it's not any more of a wetlands animal than it is a woodlands animal or an arid animal. I don't hate that it has a 90s inspired design. Even though Frontier's new design philosophy has been largely praised, there are people on twitter.com who don't like it and think Jurassic designs need to be retro. They are wrong, but there are people who prefer that, and so it makes sense to me Frontier would throw them a bone and mix design aesthetics within a pack so that there's a little something for everybody. I don't hate that idea, but I do hate that this is the pack they chose to put it in. It's taking up a slot that could have been given to a more deserving species, a more wetlands-specific species, like a big croc. I am so sorry, but how do you put together a wetlands pack, which you have given a bayou-inspired building set, like something you would see in the Everglades, and not include a big croc? Deinosuchus is right there and is possibly the most highly requested species for the game. I would prefer Sarcosuchus since I find it more visually interesting compared to Deinosuchus, but ideally I want both at some point. There's also Caprosuchus and Purosaurus. This was the perfect pack to include a big croc, and it's baffling that there isn't one in here. You could argue Frontier didn't include one because there wouldn't have been enough time to make a croc since it would be so different from everything else in the game and would probably require a unique rig. But if that's the case, then Frontier shouldn't have made Wetlands the first DLC. They chose to do Wetlands first. They could have waited to do the Wetlands pack until a croc was ready and stick Hypsilophodon in a different DLC. It really doesn't help that for some reason they saved the Hypsi reveal for last. That's the definition of ending on a whimper. They haven't given Hypsi anything that makes it unique or makes it a worthy inclusion in a Wetlands pack. It can't swim, so why is it even here? I'm being very negative, so I'm sorry to the Hypsi fans out there. I don't dislike it. I just dislike that it's in this pack instead of something more appropriate. The fact a big croc wasn't included in the Wetlands pack will go down in history as a huge missed opportunity for this game. Let's talk a bit about the DLC's structure. 3 species and about 200 themed building pieces. I'll say right now, I think this is perfectly fine as a way to package a DLC. I'm not complaining. I think it's a good amount of new content that I'm happy to pay for. I like the new bayou scenery. I think it could be fun to make a themed, swampy area of a park, even though I personally build in a more clean, realistic zoo style. Zoos can still have theming, and I imagine a dinosaur zoo would lean into that. I do think this wood set could be pretty versatile though. I like that we got some rope pieces, there's a bucket of fish, which will be great set dressing for backstage areas. This scenery gets a thumbs up from me, but only time will tell how much I actually use it. Since this game has modular building, I was always convinced that DLCs would include new scenery. Something worth pointing out though is that we got 3 species instead of 4. This is something I want to speculate about a little since all of Evolution 2's DLCs had 4 new species, with the exception of the Camp Cretaceous pack and Deluxe Edition if you count that. This is true though, even for the 2 expansions. We got a lot more content in those, like variants and skins, but in terms of completely new species, both expansions only had 4. Now, the first evolution did only have 3 new species in most of its DLCs, so there's precedent there, and of course the Wetlands Pack has a new scenery set that could be thought of as equivalent to a new species. How true that is will depend on what kind of player you are, but like I said, it's a good amount of new content either way, and so objectively, this pack offers more than the Evolution 1 dinosaur packs. Still, I was expecting 4 species and a batch of new scenery, mostly because that was the normal structure for a Planet Zoo DLC. It makes sense to me that when designing packs, Frontier would reference what they did with Planet Zoo, their other game with animals and modular building. A standard pack for Planet Zoo included 4 new habitat animals, around 200-ish new scenery pieces, a campaign scenario, and an exhibit animal, for which there is sadly no comparable mechanic in Evolution 3. Frontier, please add exhibit animals, it would be so fun. I thought Frontier would pretty closely replicate this formula for Evolution 3. They dropped the campaign scenario and obviously the exhibit animal, but I did think they would give us 4 new species and a themed collection of scenery. They suspiciously went with 3 instead, and I say suspiciously because we got an extra returning dinosaur for free at the same time as the DLC. You can see where I'm going with this. Let's address the duck in the room. Was Deinocheirus originally the 4th species in the Wetlands Pack, but Frontier saw how upset we were that it wasn't base game and moved it to the free update to avoid controversy? This is a very interesting theory that a lot of people have been throwing around, and we shouldn't treat it as fact, but I find the evidence compelling, so I wanted to talk about it. Deinocheirus is very thematically appropriate for a Wetlands DLC. It's a huge fan favorite, which makes it a strong candidate for reselling. The pack includes a sign with Deinocheirus on it, and before the game launched, everyone was whining for Deinocheirus to be base game, especially me. Right before the Xbox leak and we thought there was only 1 slot left in the roster, I recorded a crash out over Deinocheirus probably being cut, but totally dropped the video once the leak happened the next morning. Please. Frontier, please. I'm coping really hard. They're gonna want to save something really cool for the final reveal, right? It is another fan favorite. It is so unique. It's, please, please. This is our last chance. I'm hoping it's Deinocheirus. Let's hope for Deinocheirus. Let's all hold hands and pray that... When Frontier announced that the cut base game species from Evolution 2 would be re-added to Evolution 3 in free updates, and there was that confusion with Evo and Best in Slot where they thought Frontier meant all cut species, their original videos both used Deinocheirus in the thumbnail because it was the most devastating cut and therefore the most exciting to potentially come back for free. I think if this theory is true, Frontier would have made the decision before those videos premiered, but I like to think those thumbnails could have been Frontier's wake-up call, and they thought, crap, we messed up, put it in the free update. All of this is just speculation, I need to emphasize that. I just find it interesting. I'm not trying to throw shade at Frontier, obviously the right decision was to put Deinocheirus in the free update. Ultimately, they did the right thing. If the original plans were to resell it, I don't think they'd hear the end of it. Some people feel very passionately about DLC animals being resold, and if Deinocheirus was in the first DLC, that could have been a big controversy right off the bat following the game's launch and cause animosity between Frontier and their player base. We'll probably never know if Deinocheirus was originally planned for the pack, but I guess my main point here is that if future packs have 4 species instead, the evidence would be pretty damning, and it's something I do think is possible. We'll have to wait and see if these 3 species packs continue, but if they suspiciously start coming out with 4 instead, that would maybe prove Deinocheirus theory. Honestly though, even if new DLCs still have 3, that doesn't necessarily disprove it. Evo's version of this theory is that the DLC was always meant to have 3, but Deinocheirus was originally the 3rd, and they had to replace it with Hypsilophodon when they moved it to the free update, which would certainly explain Hypsilophodon not being thematically appropriate. It's all a big conspiracy theory, the duck conspiracy. Let's move on and talk about the theme of this DLC versus what people were expecting, and by extension, what we could see in the near future. Obviously, we're all waiting for the Rebirth expansion. It would have made sense for Frontier to try and get the Rebirth DLC out within the same year that the movie itself was released, but I was never fully convinced of that because the first DLC for Evolution 2 was on a smaller scale, so I did wonder if they'd really kick off support for Evolution 3 with something so huge in comparison. In a very similar boat is the Chaos Theory DLC that we're all expecting. The show just concluded in November, so again, it would have made sense to do a pack now while it's still a hot topic, but they did not go that route, and I wonder if that's partially because that DLC wouldn't be a good first pack, since it would only have one new species and would otherwise just be skins and variants, which immediately gets complicated when you consider Majungasaurus is one of those species confirmed to be returning for free at some point. Originally, I was really convinced that Suchomimus, Majungasaurus, and Pachyrhinosaurus had been cut from the roster to be resold in a Chaos Theory pack with their show designs as their new default variants, but now we know that's not the case, since Sucho is in the base game and Majunga was base game for Evolution 2, so it's coming back for free. Pachyrhino was part of the Deluxe Edition for Evolution 2, and it's unclear if the Deluxe species are included in Frontier's statement and are also coming back for free. They were available at launch, but they aren't actually base game, so we'll see. My point is, it would make sense that we get the Frontier Majungasaurus and potentially Pachyrhinosaurus. It would make sense to get those first, and then you pay for the Chaos Theory variants, rather than doing it the other way around, you know? Only time will tell how a Chaos Theory DLC might shake out. There isn't a ton of content they could squeeze out of that show. Obviously, we're looking at Beckel Spinax as a new species, and then variants for Majunga, Pachyrhino, and Sucho. Maybe a Leucistic Baryonyx skin, but that's about it. What about Rebirth, though? That's the big one, right? I do think a Rebirth expansion could either be the next DLC or the one after that. And I say that while referencing the roadmap for Evolution 2, where the first Dominion expansion was the 3rd DLC overall. They might follow that same structure, but do keep in mind Evolution 2 came out before Dominion, and Evolution 3 came out after Rebirth, so this isn't a one-to-one comparison. It's not reliable. I'm just pointing out Evolution 2 did an original DLC, then a Netflix cartoon DLC, and then a movie DLC, so maybe they'll repeat history and we get the Wetlands Pack, then the Chaos Theory pack, and then the Rebirth expansion. Frontier is being really unpredictable with this game though, so I doubt they'll do that exactly. Plus, that will be almost a year since Rebirth came out, and part of me doesn't think they'd wait that long, so it could be next. Who knows really, but what would a Rebirth expansion include? This is the fun stuff to talk about, but I'm gonna start by saying something a little controversial. I don't actually think a Rebirth expansion will be all-encompassing with all the new content based on the movie. Before you yell at me, I also don't think there's enough content to split it up into 2 entire expansion packs like they did with Dominion. Basically, I think a Rebirth expansion will continue the trend of only having 4 brand new species, and those 4 will pretty obviously be Distortus Rex, Mutodon, Titanosaurus, and Aquilops. It should also include new body variants for Spinosaurus, Quetzalcoatlus, and Mosasaurus. I am so excited to see the Frontier skins for these new models, especially Spinosaurus. I'm also expecting new skins for stuff like the Raptors, Compies, Dilophosaurus, and of course T-Rex. The skin would probably be named Ember. There would be a new campaign on a new map that's based on Ile Saint-Hubert. Hopefully some of the cast returns to record voice lines. In terms of scenery, I think we'll get some temple-inspired stuff based on the Quetzalcoatlus scene, and maybe some of the high-tech lab stuff like test tubes, hopefully a Snickers wrapper decal. I'm not too concerned about the scenery though. Obviously the focus is the animals, but there are more than 4 new animals in Rebirth. Frontier could break their pattern and squeeze them all in this one DLC, but I think we might actually see a repetition of what happened in Evolution 2 with the leftover Camp Cretaceous species. They weren't in a second dedicated Camp Cretaceous pack, they were spread out and included in Frontier's original themed DLCs. For example, they put Nothosaurus in the Prehistoric Marine Species pack. You know what I'm talking about. I think Anuregnathus and the mystery amphibian from Rebirth, if it comes to the game, will be put in future DLCs. Anuregnathus could have a spot reserved in an aviary pack or an insectivore pack. We could see the amphibian in a Permian pack, depending on what the hell it is. Maybe we'll even get this thing. Who knows what this thing is? Anyway, that's my current prediction for how a Rebirth expansion might go down. While we're here though, I want to express my concern for Titanosaurus, and hope Frontier hears me. Titanosaurus should easily be the biggest sauropod in the game by a very obvious visual margin, but right now, the male Patagotitan already clips into the hatchery during the exit animation. I don't know how they can do a faithful Titanosaurus and realistically have it exit a hatchery, which makes me a bit worried Frontier has maybe nerfed the size and made it about as big as Patagotitan, but I hope not. I really think it should be identifiably huge, and don't even get me started on the tail. Frontier has totally nerfed the tail. Tails already have issues clipping into stuff when they aren't the length of a football field. I'm very nervous to see how Titanosaurus is translated into Evolution 3 since it's pretty easily my most anticipated new species from the movie. Anyway, that's the Chaos Theory and Rebirth DLCs covered, but what else could we have in store? Like I said, if Deinocheirus Theory is true, we could see packs with 4 species and a collection of scenery, but for now, let's assume the structure of Wetlands was very intentional and planned out. Unless proven otherwise, we should assume future original packs will match the Wetlands packaging and have 3 new species with a bunch of scenery. Most Planet Zoo packs were themed off continents or biomes, and now that we have the Wetlands pack, I think it's safe to say Frontier is taking a similar approach with Evolution 3, and we'll get more biome DLCs. I think continent-based DLCs are very possible though, like Asia or South America, but considering Wetlands, I think we're reasonably looking at a desert pack, maybe a woodlands pack, a polar pack even. These themes are vague enough that it gives them the wiggle room to kind of slip in whatever they want, like Hypsilophodon in Wetlands. I am hoping we get some DLCs with stronger themes, like a Triassic pack, which would have Plateosaurus as the flagship. A Permian pack would be wonderful with Inostransavia and my beloved Deinosuchus. An aviary pack could have Archaeopteryx and, like I said, maybe Anuregnathus. With the lack of big croc in Wetlands, some people think we could get a completely croc DLC, but I don't actually think that would happen. I think a croc theme is actually too specific. DLCs are supposed to cast a wide net and offer variety. For business reasons, they should space out the crocs in these other themed packs, but I do think a semi-aquatic pack is still possible. And of course, it's a big can of worms, but I think a Cenozoic DLC is in the cards, and hopefully they'd tackle it as a full-fledged expansion pack. I think Cenozoics would call for that, and I don't see what else they could do as a second expansion, since I don't think Rebirth content can reasonably be split up like Dominion was. That's an official prediction from me. The first expansion for Evolution 3 will be Rebirth, and the second expansion will be Cenozoics. Let's see if I'm right. This is what we're used to with Evolution, smaller DLCs and then big expansion packs on occasion, but I think there will be a middle ground this time for Evolution 3. Planet Zoo also had animal packs, which were a second DLC structure with 7 habitat animals, basically no scenery, a campaign scenario, and an exhibit animal. I think it's very interesting that Frontier didn't call it the Wetlands Dinosaur Pack, because dinosaur packs will be their own thing in the future with their own structure. I think we can expect probably 6 species, maybe the full 7, and no scenery pieces. The pack would probably be just dinosaurs. I think we could start seeing dinosaur packs about a year into support, which is what they did for Planet Zoo. We should probably get Chaos Theory and Rebirth out of the way first, and then, like Planet Zoo, I could see them alternating between normal packs and dinosaur packs. That way they throw a bone for the people who like scenery, and then throw a bone for the people who just want more species, and then take turns from there with maybe a second expansion somewhere in there like Cenozoics. I did say dinosaur packs would probably be just animals with emphasis on the probably. Planet Zoo actually had a third DLC format that I don't see people bringing up a lot in speculation. As support was winding down for Planet Zoo, the last 4 DLCs were still called animal packs, but they replaced the exhibit animal with a small amount of scenery pieces, around 100, so about half of the standard amount. It felt like Frontier was experimenting with the formula and finding that sweet spot to appeal to both groups, the scenery lovers and the animal lovers. Depending on how dedicated Frontier is to adding new scenery to Evolution 3, I could see them using this approach instead and throwing a handful of scenery pieces into the dinosaur packs. Keep in mind that alongside all of these DLCs, we should also continue getting wonderful free updates that ideally complement the DLC they release with. The update that coincided with Wetlands gave us a new swamp brush and cypress trees and Deinocheirus, so I hope the free updates will continue to be thematically appropriate for their coinciding DLCs. Sadly, in these updates, we probably won't be seeing any more of these big returning fan favorite DLC species like Deinocheirus, at least not for a good while, since Frontier specifically said that starting in January, they'll be adding back in 1 cut base game species every month, and that's a lot of animals to get through. I think Majungasaurus could be next to sort of prep for a Chaos Theory DLC, but who knows. They could surprise us with 2 free animals in a month, a base game species as planned, alongside a returning DLC species. Anything is possible, but I don't think we should assume that or expect we're getting that much free content. Frontier specifically phrased the return of Deinocheirus as a sort of holiday gift to the community to thank us for the successful launch of the game, and so I don't see it being repeated. I do sadly think we'll be looking at some species like Shonisaurus and Gigantoraptor being resold to us in DLCs, which I think isn't a great look, but I'm also not furious about it. I'll buy them. I think the anger at reselling animals is justified, but I also think we should stay conscious that Frontier is in sort of a tricky spot. I think the game should have launched with all 122 species from the last game, but I think Frontier was on a time crunch because of how quickly Rebirth was thrust into production, and Universal wanted them to get a game out as soon as possible, at least in the same year that the movie released. They managed to do that, but now you have a game that still needs a lot of content and a lot of work to create that content, which you can't charge for without your audience getting upset with you. Frontier is still a company that needs to pay its employees, and that's a lot of stuff that they'd be adding to the game post-launch for free. It's kind of an impossible situation. I almost wish they just delayed the game so that every animal could have been there at launch, but they didn't. Adding all these species back for free is an incentive to get people to come back to the game and keep interest up, but Frontier won't be making any direct revenue from it, so I'm curious to see what they end up doing, and I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt. My hot take, though, is I do think DLC rosters could maybe be held to a higher standard. Hear me out. For years, Frontier just ignored the most requested animals for Planet Zoo. People were screaming for more birds, for a walrus, for a tree kangaroo. Frontier could have added the secretary bird in 3 separate packs, but they just didn't, and now support is over, and the single most highly requested animal for years was never added to the game. Can you tell I'm still upset? This is sort of a pattern for Frontier. There's often these notable missed opportunities in their animal rosters, and now they've stuck Hypsilophodon in a Wetlands Pack. As a company with employees, I understand needing to internally manage time and resources and consider if the work put into something will recoup that cost. But from the consumer end, it maybe feels a little lazy. So far though, it does seem like with Evolution 3, they're really listening to the community, and so that's a good sign. I'm just worried Deinosuchus could be this game's secretary bird, you know what I mean? That's why I was so critical of Hypsilophodon. I hate missed opportunities like that, but I will still buy every single pack they put out for this game because I'm a completionist, but I also like financially supporting them, and I always stay excited for the potential of what we could get in the future. Based on Frontier's usual DLC release schedule, I think the next pack will come out in March, and the third pack will come out in June. I think one of these will be the Rebirth expansion. With Irritator and Osteoraptor being added, I think we'll have some really exciting, really highly requested species making it into future DLCs. I honestly want to do an updated wish list because my priorities have changed slightly since the game's launch, and 6 animals from my list have already made it in. 7 if you count a new colorful mid-sized ceratopsid, 8 if you count a new colorful titanosaur from South America, and 9 if you count a smaller Dryosaurus. I really just keep winning over here. Thank you guys for watching this ramble about DLC speculation. This script took me way too long to finish, as they often do. I still want to finish my video on Rebirth, but at this rate, it's gonna be more of a retrospective, so I hope people will still be interested by the time it comes out. I also want to do that top 20-ish skins and variants video that I said I'd do like a year ago. I had it almost fully written, but then Rebirth came out and really threw things out of whack, and so I gotta rewrite it. I'd also like to do speed builds for Evolution 3 at some point, but like I said, I'm still getting the hang of it. I have uploaded quite a few things to the workshop, by the way. Here's a dino shelter I made. You can find this using the share code and then view my creator profile to see my other stuff. Maybe you'll find something useful. I spend way too long making everything perfect. It's really a curse of mine. Also, Planet Zoo 2 was confirmed for this year, so that's crazy. I need to talk about that and what I'm hoping for. Frontier, the secretary bird better be base game. Don't f with me. I'm also working on an art commission for Evolution Square, which is really cool. She's writing the sequel to her audiobook Jurassic Legacy and wanted me to make some artwork for it, and I'm really honored. I think it'll be really cute when it's done. Love you, Evo. Anyway, there's a little 2026 update for stuff on the horizon, hopefully. Thanks for watching, guys, especially if you made it to the very end. I really, really appreciate it if you're still listening. Here's to our first year of support for Jurassic World Evolution 3. I'm sure it'll be exciting. I'll see you guys next time. Bye!